Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Biotech Project. Here we are today with episode 2. I know many of you had the chance to see our kickoff video last week. Really excited about having done that. We've already had over a few hundred downloads, and the momentum's building. So thank you so much for the comments and the feedback. It's been a really great start. Today, we're really excited because we have Justin VanNest with us today, who Scott will just introduce in a moment. And it'll be our first episode where we have a live guest. So today marks a big day for us. Again, just to reiterate, feel free, follow us on social media. You'll find us on all the platforms under the Biotech Project. You can also reach us on Twitter at the Biotech Proj, P-R-O-J, or at hosts@thebiotechproject.com. So with that, I'm going to turn the mic over to Scott, and he can tell us about Justin.
Hey, everyone. Thanks, John. Super excited to have somebody I've known for quite a long time, Justin VanNest, with us today. So Justin's a sales and commercial ops leader who's got well over 12 years experience in that role, and somebody who personally has made me feel real good about sales ops and commercial ops. You know, coming from the commercial side, and I think really across the board, a lot of people really don't have a true understanding of what sales ops and commercial ops is. Lots of times people in roles like I've been in think the sales ops people are just the ones that are trying to help the company save money on paying out bonus. And we know that's not true. And super excited to get into it today with Justin and hear a little bit about his role and roles in his world and what opportunities there may be coming forward. So looking forward to talking with Justin here in just a second.
You want to break into and navigate your career in the pharma and biotech industry. We know how to teach you. This is the Biotech Project. From sales to medical affairs and everything in between, we're talking about it. No matter how you got here, from here to your next role is up to you, and we're here to help. You'll hear from guests in every role, from CEO to sales, recruiters to hiring managers. The Biotech Project. Here are your hosts, Scott Resnick and Dr. John Walsh.
All right. And welcome to the episode. So as you can, if you're watching us, you can see on screen, we've got Justin VanNest with us. So welcome to the project, Justin.
Hey, thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
Yeah.
Welcome, Justin.
You get the honor of being the first guest here on the Biotech Project.
No pressure, right?
Not at all.
You mentioned in your intro, I just want to be clear. We definitely want you to hit your goals because that means we got our forecasts right. So for sure, that's we're not trying to put roadblocks up. I think it probably feels that way sometimes, but we can get into that. I'll explain kind of how that all works out.
Yeah, that was why when John and I were talking, and I thought about who would be a great guest to bring early on, to share with us and for us to learn from. I thought sales ops immediately, and you came to mind. So I'm super excited that you agreed to be on the show and are able to join us today. So, Justin, why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself, your journey into industry?
Yeah, so I've basically been in oncology for pretty much the entirety of my career in biotech. I started actually at a small CRO, building up, EDC systems for clinical trials, and it kind of got me down a path of IT related systems and things like that. And what happened was I ended up at an oncology company, and it was a fresh sort of startup biotech, and we needed somebody to basically launch all the sales systems. So like your CRM, where you're inputting your call information and all the systems that you need for legal, medical, regulatory review for different pieces that go out to the field. All that needs to kind of be implemented, from scratch, basically, when you start. So I took a role at a company where, that I was in an IT position and kind of learning the commercial systems, and kind of hopped from company to company as, various trials either failed or we had a launch. And so my role evolved throughout commercial systems, and I launched, systems in Europe. You guys probably are familiar with Concur. It launched even Concur for Europe and a number of different countries, and really sort of just kind of got a real kind of holistic view of all the different systems and tools that a sales team and really a field team needs to succeed out in the field. And so what that did was basically get me very close to the business, and I transitioned into a sales ops role. And there you take on, so it's less about the systems at that point because IT sort of handles that. And then you have things like incentive compensation, which you talked about earlier, and commercial analytics, where you've got dashboards that help you understand your business, and you can, look at your territory, for example, and figure out what's going on with your customers. And so, a big part of that is keeping the field motivated and keeping people, like I said, aware of their business, and basically making sure that, if you're in the field, you've got all the tools you need to succeed. And that includes things like, it depends on the company, but, for if you have a fleet of cars, for example, the sales ops person might be in charge of keeping that together. If you've got, even down to like, what you're using to display your sales aids. So if it's an iPad or, any kind of other device, a lot of times that can be done there as well. And even credentialing, that's something that sales ops or field operations typically handles. But honestly, sales ops depends on the company, but it fits under the umbrella usually of commercial operations. So you've got things like forecasting, field ops, which is, like I said, credentialing and kind of all the maybe more physical tools. Commercial analytics, so that's your dashboards and, the things that help you understand your business. Sales strategy in some cases. And depending on the size of your organization, it can be one person that does all of these things, or it can be 30 people who handle like a small little chunk of those things. Depends. Usually it's about how big your sales force is. So if you've got hundreds of sales reps, you're going to have a big team in sales operations. And so it depends, really on the size of your sales force, and that usually depends on the product. So, but yeah, generally speaking, that, sales ops is there to help sales professionals succeed and allow them to just focus on relationships and building their business. So all the other stuff that goes along with sales.
Justin, one of the things that you mentioned was the size of an organization really matters in a role like this. So one of the things that was always interesting to me, and having been on the medical side, often in some of the meetings, I got to be spectator to some of this, but certainly never was the person who turned those wheels. But you have. So maybe you could peel back the curtain a little bit for us and tell us, what does that look like when you're trying to decide what is the size of a sales organization? How do you guys do the math? How do you get there? And clearly, different therapeutic areas can look different. So what are some of the things that you think about in the decision making when you make recommendations about how to build sales teams?
Yeah. So you said you did the math, and that's exactly right. A lot of times it starts with an equation, and so you have, for example, a number of physicians that you need to reach, or a number of patients that you have in your sort of bucket of eligible patients, and how many physicians do you need to call on to reach that number of eligible patients, and how often can your reps call on them? And so there's a lot of math that goes behind that. So for example, if you've got, 10,000 doctors you need to reach, it depends on the size of your territories. But, if, basically in oncology, for example, the sort of standard is 3 calls per day. And so that and that's a meaningful kind of in-person interaction, or, with the pandemic, maybe more of a remote interaction, but certainly more than just, dropping a piece of paper or having, sending a quick email. And so this kind of gold standard, if you will, of 3 calls per day is the starting point for the math that kind of builds up how many people you need to cover your indication. So if it's a huge indication and you've got thousands and thousands of patients and thousands of doctors you need to see, and then you have an idea of like what your cadence is. So you have some doctors are very important because they've got the most patients or they're at a very important center. So you want to talk to them, say, 12 times a year if possible, which we all know is probably unlikely. But, you have a goal. You want to see this doctor or at least be, in front of their staff once a month because they're that important to your business. So that's one, piece of the math that goes into it. And you kind of take all these things and you put them together, and in the end, it spits out a number, and it'll say, okay, you need 30.7 reps to cover the entire United States for this indication, based on all the math and all the inputs. And then, you can't just say, okay, well, we need 30, that's what we're going to do. You have to, look at the map, understand, where your customers are. So that it's not all math. You have to take that as an input and then also kind of bring logic into it and understand, like I said, where your customers are. Are the patients concentrated in certain centers? Do you need a territory that covers North Dakota and, Western Montana? Probably not. So those are the kinds of things that you consider as you're building out the sales force and figuring out, the rest of the picture. You look at the map and find where your sales territories might be, and then see what that number is. And sometimes it's more than what the equation spits out, and sometimes it's less. It depends on kind of how your specific market shapes out.
So, it's really enlightening to kind of look behind the curtain, some of these decisions, right? We read on the news daily companies making decisions to either, downsize or right size, whatever the buzzword is, or increase, in one area versus the other. I guess the question for now is, do you think that these formulas or these recipes, if you will, are changing, quicker than they would have in the past, or, is this a temporary kind of change, do you think? What do you think with regards to these recipes for, successful organizations?
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it probably has to do with access at this point, right? Where you're, how many physicians are even letting people in the door to have a sales conversation right now? And so that, that could definitely play a role. It's probably not so much the specialty products like oncology products, but maybe more the general medicine products that, you've got massive sales teams right now, 300 plus, reps, and they're all, calling the same doctors. They're there every single week, basically talking to the same doctors. And those, if access is limited now, it cuts down on their workload quite a bit. So I think there's probably companies that are doing the math and looking at things like promotion response. And so that what that kind of analysis is it says, what portion of the sales of this product are because a rep is having a conversation with a doctor. And it could be, depending on the product, it could be as much as 95%. So it's a huge, we need reps. We absolutely need reps. Or, it could be a different number. And so, for example, I've done an analysis like this in the past where the data indicated that if we cut out all the reps, the product would still sell 70% of what it was before, even if there's nobody calling on the physicians. And then it sort of degrades over time. So you could, you look at it basically over 5 or 10 years. And your the equation is, what does it cost to have a sales force? And then what are we losing on that other end when we don't have a sales force? And if that's imbalanced in a way that it costs a lot more to have a sales force, then essentially, whichever company it is that's making this decision is going to look at that and say, hey, maybe we want to think about cutting down on our sales force because we don't need them as much as we did before. But again, I think that doesn't necessarily apply to specialty products. It's more the large indications or kind of products that sell themselves. For example, Keytruda, right? I mean, everybody knows Keytruda is this sort of wonder drug, and you probably don't have an oncologist in the entire country that's not using it. So that might be a drug that, and I have no indication of whether or not they've done any of this analysis, but that might be a case where a company might look at it and say, well, okay, we need fewer reps in the future because everybody knows this product now, and everybody knows all the data behind it. So that's just one particular circumstance that might make sense there.
Do you think that this is an example of the pendulum swinging to one extreme and then maybe going to have to come swinging really hard back to the other in the future?
Yeah, I think potentially it is. I mean, the thing is, you're always going to need to evangelize your products in some way, and not every doctor consumes that information the same way. But potentially as physicians get younger, right, they're more receptive maybe to non-personal promotion, so things like email or a Zoom call, for example. You might get a different looking sales force in the future, where it's home-based and you're having Zoom calls as opposed to going into the office or that kind of thing. But again, it really depends, I think, on the product. I mean, in oncology, it seems to be very different than, some of the more generalized indications or, general medicine or going to a group practice, that kind of thing.
So, Justin, if someone was interested in doing the role that you do, maybe you can give some advice to the folks out there. As you know, the Biotech Project was designed with how to break into industry or how to navigate your career in the industry. So if I were on the outside looking to get in, or if I was already on the inside in a role and I wanted to move there, what should I be thinking about? What skills should I have? How do I make myself right for that role?
Sure. So I think there's a couple different ways to get in. I think, like I said, the way I got in was through commercial IT, and getting that understanding of all the different systems that kind of play a role for sales and sales operations. But I've seen also, sales ops come from the field as well, because who better to tell people or to help people get their sales done than someone who's done it themselves, So I think it can come either way. And there's certain probably personality types, people who are highly analytical, people, who love digging into spreadsheets and producing kind of, a lot of it has to do with tracking performance. And so, you got to have that mindset, like you want to dig into the details and find the needle in the haystack and help find, connect the dots there. So it's a little bit of a personality type, but I would say, you've got the right background if you're coming either from commercial IT or sales in the field. And, it used to be for the folks in the field, it was tough for them to jump in because they would have to move to wherever the home office was. And now, a lot of jobs, especially this one, can easily be done fully remotely with no problem at all. So I think you might see more of that potentially in the future, people coming from sales into ops because they don't necessarily have to move to where the home office is anymore. But those would be two kind of avenues. And, I've seen also, I guess, people come from more of a finance role. So you could come from finance, for example. You do a lot of the same kind of, financial modeling and things that you would. So, an incentive comp plan, someone who's got a finance background could probably easily administer a plan like that. So that's another avenue potentially as well.
So let's jump into things like incentive comp and, forecasting and maybe incentive plans or contests, as they're, routinely called, and stacked ranking, and, all these kind of buzzwords that seem to be commercial ops, world. What are the trends in industry that you're seeing when it comes to that? We know that we are in the midst of the Great Resignation. We hear companies talking about trying to do one of two things. I mean, I've heard some consultants to industry saying that we're in a time where for certain roles, you can bring somebody in and that can get 70 to 80% of the success, and pay them 50% because they are, brand new or they don't have a certain skill set. So that's option one that, we're hearing some consultants say to industry. I don't like that because I'm, the experienced guy that's been really successful. And then, the other thing that you're hearing from companies and from leaders is that, we're in the midst of this drought, if you will, of, the best of the best being available and willing to take on, roles, and you have to retain and attract. So, what do you think the trends coming forward are for organizations in general? What are some of the ways you're hearing people want to bring resources to retain, and attract, folks? And what do you think some of the things that are going to change are?
Yeah, so you kind of hit on two major topics there. I think one is a comp, and the other is sort of the idea that you can replace your sales force with a subpar version of it, but pay them a lot less. Those are. So I'll start with that because I think that's a mistake, the reason why is because reputation matters. If you've got people with excellent relationships, in a lot of cases, especially if you're hiring, in oncology, for example, a lot of cases, these physicians and sales reps have known each other for a decade or more, and they're good buddies. And if all of a sudden the next day a person comes in who's sort of fresh out of college or something like that, who's just sort of dropping off a pamphlet and not really having the same kind of level of connectedness, I think that can hurt business. And, it is a math equation in the end of the day. And I think it would be a mistake for an organization to do something like that, unless it's a brand that's sort of coming off of, maybe it doesn't have exclusivity anymore, and it's not necessarily a major blockbuster like it was in the past. That would be one, maybe scenario where that makes sense. But, you don't want your company to, you don't want your customers to sour on your company and think, oh my gosh, they replaced my friend who I've known for 2 decades with this kid or with this person who doesn't really know, the same amount of detail that person knew. So I think relationships really matter in this case. And so, yeah, in my opinion, I wouldn't go that route, even if the math did check out, because ultimately you're sort of degrading your brand as a company if you do that. So,
and I would guess that there'd be a big expense with trying to fix that if somebody went down that path and it didn't go well.
Yeah, exactly. And then you probably have higher turnover if that happens. With a group of inexperienced or younger people, they might move on quickly. As opposed to some, these sort of seasoned reps who understand the business better and kind of, have been there and know what good looks like. And so I think that's a key to keeping and retaining people, is having people who understand that and can see that they're being treated fairly and well, and have a good comp plan, for example. And one of the what I've seen with comp plans recently is you want them to be very simple. And I shouldn't say that's the case with everything, but it's the best way to motivate people is for them to clearly understand, I think, how they're getting paid and what they're getting paid on. And some of those plans, I'm sure you've seen it yourself, Scott, where you have no idea ultimately what you're getting at the end of the quarter, because it's hard to translate looking at the plan, what it is you're even getting paid on, and what percentage is this versus that. And so, I've seen in the time that I've been doing this, I've seen plans get super complicated where they've got 10 different elements and you're getting paid on each one of them by some percentage. And then others that are just, hey, you're getting, for each patient you get X amount of dollars, So it can be super basic, which I think is really motivating. It helps people clearly understand their goal. Or it can be really complicated, and then it just, it's convoluted, and you're never going to get 100% buy-in on a comp plan. But I think the simpler they are, the easier it is for people to understand, and it's more motivating in that way. So another
Justin,
way of potentially retaining people.
Yeah. So out in the field, it's a complex place, right? Obviously, you've got sales professionals that are out there. We have market access colleagues that are out there. In my case, we had medical field teams that were out there. So in taking all of that into account, right, and being respectful of the customer's time, but also having your business flow, maybe you could tell us a little bit about what are the cross-functional groups that you work about? What do you think about what those complex organizational field interactions look like? Because it could seem really simple, right? Here's the math, put a few salespeople out, life is good. But in fact, it's much more complicated. So.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of interaction. So in sales ops, depending on the structure of the team, you're working very closely with market research a lot of times because, the data, for example, you're bringing in a lot of data if you're on the analytics side, and you're buying it from various sources, and it all comes in. You have to triangulate and kind of understand what it all means. And without, you also have to add in the market research to get that qualitative side of it and understand the human side of the decisions that are being made. And so there's close interaction with market research. In some cases, depends on the organization. Medical tends to occasionally need an operations type role, at least to kind of help them understand what's going on in the field and kind of track activity, which is not necessarily something that's done often or even at every organization. But it can happen, and I've only seen maybe recently where medical teams are starting to bring in more of an ops person that helps with that sort of thing, and just helps to understand the goings on out in the field and make sure people are focused where they should be. And so, there is a little bit of interaction with medical, and typically. At least a few times a year, the sales ops folks are presenting to even up to the CEO, president of the company, because ultimately they're the ones who understand best from a holistic sense what's going on with the business, because they're looking at all the data as it comes in, and they know the trends, or they should know the trends of how sales are going, and which accounts are struggling or doing well, and the sales ops person should really be in and understanding all of that. So you have times where you're presenting to the CEO to let them know how you're doing, and sometimes it's a really regular occurrence. I think sales ops, your typical, like your customer, your everyday customer for sales ops is the sales leaders. So your directors who kind of coordinate with their teams in the field, the head of sales, head of marketing, and like I said, your commercial head, or you're even up to the CEO. A lot of times what you do is present or prepare presentations for the head of your commercial organization, and then that person brings that up to the CEO, but you're usually in that meeting so that you can kind of answer some of the detailed questions too. But yeah, it can be a great experience, and it's a lot of exposure, honestly, in sales ops, because you see, you're able to bring value to the sales organization, but also, if for example, you're building dashboards for your commercial team, a lot of times what happens is those will be seen by other people in the organization, and they'll say, oh, hey, I want that for myself too. And so, and the other areas of the organization don't necessarily have a person that can do that. So then you sort of swap hats and start to build out dashboards and things for other groups as you have availability. So very visible, person in the organization, and so you get to see a lot of things, and especially if it's a smaller company where you're maybe an N of one or two, then you definitely get to see a lot more of that outside of just your kind of zone.
So for somebody that's listened to the project today and saying, you know what, I never really thought about opportunities in sales ops, but I know I've seen on my company's intranet that there's opportunities there. What do I look for? What is a typical day for somebody in sales ops?
So go ahead, Scott.
Yeah, I was just going to say, if you can kind of, walk us and the audience through what's a typical day for somebody in sales ops look like?
Yeah. So, there's sort of two sides of it. You have, generally there's larger sort of projects that are going on over quarter, over time. In the process of a launch, for example, you've got a lot of different things you need to bring up and spin up and have working. Things like not just the dashboards are sort of the front end of it, but there's a lot that goes behind that, and you have to, so you have big projects to like bring data in, work with a data warehouse company and synthesize the data in a way that it's usable and kind of accessible to create reports with, or kind of just help, find targets, for example, sales targets. And so you have these sort of long-term projects, and then you have day-to-day sort of, for example, a sales leader might come and say, hey, I'm going over to Memorial Sloan Kettering next week, and I would like to understand, what their business looks like over the last, however many months. Is it trending positive? Who are the doctors that are treating our patients? Whatever you can give me on this particular, account, help me understand my business there. And so those are more of the daily interactions that comes up, and you can, kind of churn something out within a few days or even the same day. I like to do things like really quickly. So if I've got a request like that, I'd probably do it same day.
I just want to make a comment on that real quick, Justin. Yeah. I've literally, when we've worked together, sent you emails on something that I thought would take like a week to get done, and within like a half hour got an email back. So just for anybody that's listening that may be in a position like yours, the front facing commercial guys, that's incredible to see, and you should follow suit. So sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No worries. I mean, that's kind of I would say the major, functions. You have these long-term projects, maybe some shorter-term ones, things like market research, where you're, you might be doing a small study that you're interviewing maybe 10 people, and just to get a sense for certain questions that you need answers to. Those are maybe more short-term. It takes over the course of a few weeks, as opposed to some of the bigger projects that are months and months. So it's project management, both long-term and short-term. And then these little sort of one-off requests throughout the day. You get really close to your sales leaders. Those are your kind of, you buddy up with them, and it ends up being a really great experience. And you see a lot and you learn a lot. And a lot of times too, what I try to do is go out into the field and do field rides with the reps, because I think that's the best way to understand, to see basically the results of the work that you're doing as a sales ops professional. You get out there and you see, okay, this is how they're using that tool. That's not how I intended it to be used, but this is what people are thinking when they see it. And so it allows me to kind of get that perspective as well, and see kind of how I can change things to make things better for the folks in the field, or maybe when I thought this dashboard or this report was super clear, it's not necessarily being understood in that same way by everybody. So, I mean, it's a great experience, and I'd recommend sales ops to anybody who's kind of interested in seeing that kind of the backside of things, and really kind of helping the organization as a whole succeed from a sales perspective.
That's awesome, and this 35 minutes that we've been talking about this has been really enlightening for me, especially not being directly on the commercial side. So for people who are out listening, I really hope it's been valuable. I think maybe, as we wrap up, if you think about it, what would be some words of advice or suggestion that you might give to somebody who's interested in a role on the commercial side or coming into the very specific role that you do? Maybe you can give us some words of wisdom.
Sure. Yeah. So I've heard people describe the sales side as sort of like the dark side, come to the dark side. I think a lot of times our industry is sort of villainized a little bit because we've got these very expensive products and there's some negative connotations to sales in pharmaceuticals. And I have never been around anybody that wasn't passionate about helping people in this industry. And I think if you are passionate about, because what you're doing is you're taking a product that maybe someone has never heard of and doesn't know that will help them in their life. It could help people survive another however many years and be with their family. If they don't know it exists, then they're not going to get it, or they're not even going to know to ask for it. And so, ultimately what you're doing in this role, in any role really on a sales organization, is helping people understand that they have options and that, you could be saving a life potentially someday by either, connecting the dots. Hey, Dr. Smith has a patient who might need this product, or, so just things like that. I mean, I think you want to, don't be scared of sales, and don't think of it as this negative, evil corporation. It's not that. It's everyone I've worked with, they're very passionate about helping people, and ultimately it's about the patient and making lives better. So my advice, I guess, is, if that's how you feel, come on over and join the party.
I think you make a great point. I had an opportunity once to speak to an entire organization, not as a sales rep, but as a cancer survivor. And what I reminded everybody at the organization was that regardless of what role you take on, and hopefully, the project helps people find and expand their careers and their opportunities. But the bottom line is, regardless of what role you have when you're in this industry, everything you do on the other side of that is a patient. And if people remember that, then you're in it for the right reasons and doing the right things. The last question I have for you. So somebody is, thinking about sales ops now. What are the 2 or 3 things that, you have to be able to make it in sales ops? And it could be something as simple as, we joke, I don't know how to do pivot tables, so I can never work in sales ops. But, what's the real deal? What are the 2 or 3 things that, you have to be able to succeed in sales ops?
Yeah. One, I think, is the desire to dig into the details. Not everybody is interested in getting down to like the nitty gritty and really digging into data and looking at spreadsheets, for example. So I would say that you have to be that kind of person that's sort of analytical minded and interested in finding the problem in a giant stack of information. So that would be one. I think, another key element to it is relationship building. There's a lot of, you're working with sales folks for the most part, right? So you got to be one of those people that develops relationships well. Or I shouldn't say you have to be, but typically you want to be one of those people that is able to form strong relationships with your customers. And the reason why is because if a lot of times you're putting data in front of them, and if they don't trust you, they're not going to trust the data that you put in front of them. So trust and relationship building is very important in sales ops as well. And if I'm trying to think of the third thing, honestly, but I think those are the 2 main. You got to be interested in the detail, and then relationship building. I think are 2 main sort of characteristics that you want in a good sales ops person.
Well, thank you, Justin. It's been awesome having you as our first guest, and I think you set the bar really, really high. I know I can speak for myself that I learned a lot today and some things that I didn't know, and hopefully folks that are listening and watching gain something from this. Justin, we're going to put your bio up with the episode page. And I suggest to anybody that is looking for somebody to connect with, especially on LinkedIn, that's really just a gentleman and really somebody who's an expert and just a true leader in sales ops and commercial ops, that they reach out to Justin either through us or on his LinkedIn page. John, any closing remarks?
Yeah, I mean, Justin, this was awesome. Really appreciate the time and your expertise. Shameless plug for Justin. Scott and I have had the fortune of working in the same organization. I know it's always been a pleasure. So anybody who's listening who needs a really great commercial sales op person, look Justin up. And for those of you who are interested in getting into the field, I'm sure Justin would tackle some more questions for you offline. But thank you so much. Really appreciate you spending the time with us, and we hope to catch up again soon.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. Appreciate it. I look forward to seeing more episodes of the podcast.
Yeah. And for anybody that is looking and listening, please go ahead and subscribe to either our YouTube channel or to the podcast. We're available on pretty much at this point all the podcast networks.
Scott and John
and if we're not there yet, we will be soon.
Combined expertise,
so jump on to
with
Apple
roles that have covered
Podcasts
everything
or
from frontline
whatever your favorite
sales to
podcast
senior
is,
vice president of
and look us
medical
up
affairs.
and give a listen.
Scott and John
Visit the website,
are industry
www.thebiotechproject.com.
knowledge
Easiest
from
way
guests
to
in
find the
every
site.
role from
And
CEO
thank you.
to sales,
And looking forward
recruiters to
to
hiring
bringing you the
managers.
next
We hope
episode
you've
soon.
enjoyed the
Take
show,
care, Ron.
and we hope you've
Thank
gotten
you.
some useful and practical information. We'll be back soon, but in the meantime, check out the website at www.thebiotechproject.com. And for questions and comments, send an email to hosts@thebiotechproject.com. See you next time.